Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Hive's Automate Your Project Intake in 30 Minutes webinar. Joining us today are Brian Holthouse, our automation expert, who is based in Texas. We've got Gina Lockwood from our customer success team, who is hailing from Orlando, Florida, and myself, Susanna Wilson. I'm a Chief Marketing Officer here at Hive, and I am based in LA. Here's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to introduce you to the typical use cases for project intake. Brian is going to talk you through how Hive Forms and Hive Automate work together to produce this amazing magic that speeds up your project intake massively. We're going to share some recipes for building workflows in just a matter of minutes, and we're going to answer all your questions as well. There is an incentive for asking questions. We've got some Hive swag for you for the end of the session. And now I'm going to hand it over to Brian. Oh, just one thing. If by any chance you have not come across Hive before, this is your first encounter with us, just want to remind you that Hive is the only project management platform in the world that is actually designed by users. So everything that we create in terms of features and functionality in our platform is dictated by what you need to see and how you want your workflows to work. So you can always send us your feature requests using our product form, and our engineering team is going to build it for you. So this is your project management platform and the way that you want to work.
Awesome. Thanks, Suze. So today we're going to cover the use case of a marketing team receiving different types of work requests for different stakeholders. This workflow is, of course, relevant for any type of team that receives requests for work. For this process, we'll take into account the need for scoping, committing to the work or rejecting it, communication, project planning, organization, and assigning out the work internally. So what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Our clients have shared with us that there are a lot of manual processes regarding work order intake. Sometimes requests are routed through emails, through Slack messages, sometimes over the phone, or occasionally just written down on a sticky note. Hive can help solve these issues. So what we're going to walk through today is how Hive provides a way to automate that intake process to save the requester time and streamline the marketing team's efforts in planning and execution of the work. Now that I've shared a little bit about the use case, let's take a look at the parts of our platform that make this all possible. So forms help you collect details about work orders, bugs, or new projects, while directly transforming the form submission into actions or projects within Hive. Forms can be accessed directly from the platform for licensed users, and they also have shareable URLs that can be sent out for anyone to use. Next slide, Gina. Hive Automate is the integration and automation part of our platform. It helps our users reduce manual effort and increase efficiency by using a trigger and action-based approach for workflows that we call recipes. Users can start from scratch, creating their own recipes, or use any of our 100 recipes available in the community library. Recipes from that library can be quickly copied to your workspace and also customized further to fit your business needs. Go to the next one. So Hive Forms and Hive Automate are game changers when used together. Based on the information submitted through one of our forms, you can design automated processes to categorize the request by specific team, region, or workflow, and then make changes to the request and apply templates to the action or the project. And the next one. So in our use case today, we have a few of these Hive Automate recipes built out to demonstrate for you all. A few of them that we're going to cover is the intake process. If you're getting a request for an action or a project, automatically assigning out the work, automatically notifying the form submitter, applying templates automatically based on if it's an action or a project and the type of work each one entails. And then also automatically archiving requests that might be saved for later or rejected. All right, I'll go ahead and take over the screen share, Gina. So now that we've gone through a few of these slides, I want to walk through a few key concepts in Hive before we get into the specific use case. So what we're looking at here is the project navigator. This is your Active Directory within Hive, where all live projects are stored. There are two main concepts as you build in Hive, projects and action cards. Both can have multiple levels of detail, creating parent-child hierarchies to organize and summarize your work. We have a saying here at Hive that sharing is seeing. So if you are not invited to a project, it will not appear for you here. This helps from both a permissions perspective as well as scalability as your team and usage grows. So in this view here, you can see things like status of each project, start date and due date. That was active projects. You can also set up project templates to start new projects off with the same actions, statuses, and assignees for ease of use. We jump into a project here. We also have 6 different views that you can use to see your projects. So this is the status view. It's a Kanban layout, and these statuses are fully customizable. We also have a team view, which is great for team leads, and you can drag and drop cards around this view to reassign work. We also have label view, and you can create custom labels to help organize the information better for filtering and reporting. We also have a calendar view, which is great for anyone who likes to work out of a calendar. You still see all the same information as the other views, just in a calendar format. We also have a Gantt view, which is really helpful for creating different timelines and to see the big picture of a project. And lastly, we have table view, which is great for people who are used to working out of Excel files and really enjoy the row column based cell editor. So I personally like working out of status view. So that's what we'll use for today. But my team members could be using any of the other views while looking at the same information. So let's take a look at an action card here. You can think of this as a task required to complete your project. So you can add an assignee or multiple assignees. You can add start and due dates. You can create sub-actions. Sub-actions can also be assigned to different team members and have their own due dates. They're essentially full action cards just nested in a hierarchy. There's also the ability to add labels and custom fields to each card. And I'll get into these specific ones when we run through the use case here. And the assignees will also receive real-time notifications so that they know what they need to work on and when it needs to get done. At the bottom here, we also have commenting. So if you have a question, you can mention your team members in the comment section. And this really helps kind of keep everybody organized and coordinated, and also keeps all relevant communication together to save time. All right, now let's take a look at forms. So if I hit new up here in the top bar of the UI, you can see here that we have request form, but you can also pin forms here for quick access, or click into this to kind of get to the landing page. So if I click in here, I can see all of my forms that are set up. You can see here I pinned the intake one because it's an important one I want to use over and over. You can also copy the URL that you can share out, as well as edit the form. So this is kind of the back end of how to build a form. So at the top, again, we have that URL you can share out, title, description. Over here on the left, we have a toolbox of different types of questions that you can build the form with. So single input, checkboxes, radio groups, drop downs, pretty much everything you'd need to build out a form to fit your needs. As we get to the bottom here, you can also put attachments, images, dates, as well as dynamic users, projects, labels, custom fields from your actual workspace. If I take a look at some of the questions I've already set up here, I take a look at this one here and edit it. We also have the notion of conditional logic. So if I scroll down here and take a look at this question 6 will only be visible if the answer to the previous question happens to be something specific. This allows you to build out your forms in more of a dynamic manner so that they're relevant for more users, making one form available and easy to use depending on the different answers that the submitters choose. Down at the bottom here, we also have our settings for the form. So if you wanted to specify a confirmation message, have the title, include the form name, date and time. You also have a couple options here around what is the default action that the form takes. So here I've kind of clicked that each time a form is submitted, it'll be added to a specific project, the intake project that I plan to use. I have a specific assignee that I want to automatically get the request for work. And if every submission I wanted a specific template, I would apply that here. However, we're going to use Automate to dynamically apply action templates a little later. So I've obviously gone ahead and built this form out for us today. So let's take a look at what the front end looks like. So here you get a landing page with some questions. So let's go ahead and fill one of these out. Summary of the request, video work regarding webinar. Let's say company D, description, webinar video recording cleanup for website use. We can go ahead and pick a due date. Let's give them a couple weeks to work on it. And notice here I mentioned the conditional logic. When I click the type of content video here, that's where I get another question popping up. If I were to have picked a logo here or a blog, I might get different questions that are relevant to what I've selected here. So for the video, we're doing this in 30 minutes. So I want that length of video to be 30 minutes. So now that I've submitted it, where does this card go? So I can go ahead and click view your request now. It will take me not only to the right project, but also pull up the action card. I'm gonna go ahead and close this for just a second to kind of describe the intake project itself. So now the purpose of this intake project is to serve as the scoping and decision-making step between the request and the teams working on the request. Just because someone asks for something doesn't always mean that it's going to get approved. Automation can be an extremely helpful tool, but sometimes you just want a person to be able to look at the work order before allocating out your team's resources. So let's go ahead and open that card back up. You can see here that the title has been filled out from the form, the title I gave it, as well as the company name put up in the title for ease of quick glancing throughout the project. The description, I've gone ahead and mapped from the form all the answers from the form so that you have a quick glance to see what the submitter picked for each of the questions. Assignee, You'll notice here that the assignee is actually Alice, not myself like we designated in the form settings. This starts to get into some of the automation logic we've applied to the intake process. For this project, Alice and I decided that while I would do the scoping for any full campaign, she would handle some of the smaller requests dealing with a blog, logo, or video work. Here with the dates, we can see here that we actually have a range of dates, while on the form, we only selected a due date. We've automated that any new card has a start date equal to the date that it was created. This will give us a good idea of how short of a turnaround the submitter was actually looking for. Status, we've gone ahead and thrown the card in unstarted, just as kind of an initial bucket, so we can see what requests have come in that we haven't taken a look at. We could also take some manual steps here to set, say, a priority level or estimate the amount of time that this request would take. From here, we could also connect the card with an email, attachments, or even a Hive note relevant to this work order. The custom fields that we have set up here for this action card, a couple of them are already filled out for us straight from the form. So I wanted the company name to always be in a custom field, as well as the type of content. But I've left action or project as kind of a manual step here. So this gives Alice and I the chance to take a look at the request and decide, is this a task or does this require a full project? I would go ahead and for this video request, just make it an action. For labels, we have another way of organizing submitted cards. So we have an automation running here that whenever a new card is created in this intake project, the appropriate type of content is applied as a label. This gives us increased visibility and filtering capabilities should we want to see how many of a specific type of request have been coming in, which that label view that I showed earlier would be great for. And of course, following the card is the person assigned and the person who submitted the card automatically, so we can get updates to what's happening with the request. Now, taking a look at this project in status view, we have a number of kind of customizable statuses going on here. I mentioned unstarted as kind of that first bucket for requests coming in that maybe we haven't taken a look at yet. I created one called needs info, helps us just organize requests that maybe we've taken a look at, but it wasn't filled out all the way, or we want some more information around. We're just not sure what to do with it yet. In progress, just another way to bucket requests so that we can see what requests Alice and I are kind of taking a look at and in the process of kind of deciding what to do with it. Now, the auto archive and completed is where I'd like to focus for some of this automation. So if we were to open a card, you can, of course, archive actions manually through the bottom right of the action card. However, I really like to automate things. I also prefer to move cards around on the screen visually instead of clicking things on the card. So here we actually have an automation that anytime I drag a card to that status, it becomes archived automatically. You might also have noticed as I did that there's one more email showing up for me as a notification in my mail app in Hive. So my Hive mail is integrated directly into my work email. So I have another automation that anytime an action card in this project is archived, it will actually send me a rejection email as the form submitter. I originally submitted that card, so it just sent me the update. So now with this notification, if the form submitter was a licensed user, we have some conditional logic to provide the contact info of the person in your organization who actually rejected the request. And these emails are completely customizable And we can get into how to do that during the technical portion of the demo. So completed, the last status on the page here. I'm treating completed as the status that says this work request has been approved by either Alice or myself. And now this needs to be added to our team's planned work. It needs to be sent to the right project. It needs to be assigned out to the right person. It needs to have sub actions based on the type of work added, and it also needs to be scheduled. So there are quite a few steps that even with a powerful platform like Hive, I might be still doing manually. With Hive Automate, we definitely intend to change all of that. We also would like an email automatically sent out saying that the request was approved and has been added to the work plan, similar to the email that I got when I rejected it. So let's go ahead and complete one of these actions. If I were to move new logo requests from company A over here, you can see that I've actually kept the card in the intake project for our record keeping. That way we can kind of see what has actually been approved without just moving the card around within the workspace. If we go back over to our project navigator and go back to active projects, we can see here that we have kind of a parent project hierarchy organized by level of work for each request and each company. So if I jump into company A, you can see that I now have a new unstarted request for this project. So a new card has been created here and it carried over a lot of the information from the original requests, like the title, the description, the labels, and the dates. However, the new card has also been modified to better reflect the work that the team now needs to do. We've done this by applying a specific action template based on the type of content that was requested. So notice a few other sub actions here. Let's go ahead and take a look at what that action card template looks like. So if we go to our workspace settings, click on action card templates. This was a logo. So here we can see a preset template that I've chosen to apply to any type of request that was regarding a logo design. So at the top, you can see here, just name of the template. We can put default descriptions. We can add specific labels or assignees. I've actually chosen to use a placeholder for this type of work instead of a specific person. I want to give that responsibility to the person running the project to decide who is our designer for this project, for this company A project. From here, we can also add time estimates, automatically add due dates, create sub actions. Within the sub actions, you can set which day in the schedule things need to start, how long they need to take. Each sub action can also have its own label and assignee as well. And then down here at the bottom, you can also add custom fields, approvals, or attachments. And then, of course, set security settings for who can edit the template. So if you only want administrators and the author to be able to change things in the future. So now that I've actually got this new card here, I mentioned I wanted to give the autonomy of who could assign out the work to the person running this specific project. So if I were to come in to any of these cards and click on the designer placeholder and actually assign this out, let's say George is our designer for this project. You can see here now that every request that's been made and put into company A is now assigned to George for a quick and easy way to kind of assign out that work while automating the type of user that needs to be preset for those requests. Let's go back to the intake project and see how the automation handles a different request. So the last example I'd like to cover for this use case would be what happens if the request for work is too large to be an action card. within a project. A full campaign, for example, would require maybe its own larger team to do the work, as well as plan further in advance, track more steps, have more people involved. So if I go ahead and complete a request that says a full campaign here, if we go back to Project Navigator, you'll see that now I have, instead of creating one action for this request, now a full project is kicked off and stored under another parent project that we've titled Client Full Campaigns. So instead of starting from scratch with a blank project, we've done something similar to this in the past. We already know the steps that it takes to get this type of work done. So we've gone ahead and created this with a template that's already been set up. So as you can see here, this is the new project that was just created. And all I did was drag a card into the completed status in the intake. So the statuses are all already created. The actions are already set up in their specific places with their own sub actions, with their own due dates, and specific work assigned out to different users. So now that that's complete, from here, the Hive intake process really has you set up for success. Hive Forms allows you to be more efficient and organized, while Hive Automate reduces the manual efforts, but still gives you that decision-making capability where you need it. So that concludes the kind of first section of this webinar around the use case. Now I'd like to take a look at Hive Automate, the recipes within it, and how they're kind of working behind the scenes to accomplish a lot of this automated work. So from here, within a project, how do we get to Hive Automate? I already have this pinned as an app that I use regularly. If you haven't turned on Hive Automate yet, you can get to it by going to Apps, scrolling to the bottom, turning on Hive Automate, and you can either click Open from here or pin it to the bar, and then click it Open here. From here, you'll be brought to a landing page with a few tabs on the side. If we go ahead and click into My Recipes, I've created a project folder for today, Intake Webinar. And now here I have a number of recipes that have been running for this demonstration. So the first one I want to cover here is the automatic assignee. If we go ahead and click on it, while it's running, you can't edit a recipe. So if you're testing, it might not be running and you can go ahead and edit. But now that we're going to kind of get into the steps, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recipe. And now we can edit it. So the first step in creating a recipe is deciding when you want the recipe to kind of fire off. Here we've built a trigger-based recipe. You can also set these to a specific schedule if you want them to run on a specific cadence. But here the trigger that I've set up is actually a Hive trigger. If you have not configured this yet before, in your workspace settings, there's a tab on the left that says API info. It will give you an API key. It will give you a workspace ID and a user ID to set up this connection. Once you've done that, you can go into the setup. So here, I've set the trigger to listen for actions that are new in a specific project. So this recipe will run anytime a new action card is created in that intake project. From there, I'm actually creating a variable. Now we have a number of different concepts within recipes here. You'll notice here on this pop-up recipe data. As I go through this and as we work through multiple steps in these recipes throughout the rest of this demo, you'll notice that you can kind of build on data as it's already arrived in the recipe. We call these data pills, and you can click them to add them to open fields that you'd be configuring kind of in a waterfall nature throughout the steps. So for here, when the recipe triggered, we have a number of things that we're getting back from that actual action card that's been created. You'll also notice to the left, you'll see a data type. So whether it's an integer, a float, a string, or an array, this will give you an idea of kind of what type of data you're working with as well. The next step here that I've gone through is when we get information about an action card, the custom fields that are attached to it actually come through as an array. So what I need to do is pull out a specific value because I want to automatically assign this work based on what was answered in the custom field for that type of content, if you'll recall. So what I've done here, maybe a little more advanced, but I've pulled in that custom field array, and then I've used a couple commands here, which we have some great documentation on that I know Gina will share the link out to at the end of this, that we need to kind of filter that array down. So where the specific ID was the custom field ID relevant to the type of content, I want to pull out the actual selected value and then join it to create a string so that I have the answer to that. Within updating the assignee, I also wanted to update the action to have the specific label for that type of content work as well. Here, we pass the ID from that first step. Like I mentioned, kind of waterfalling, passing data along throughout the recipe. So if we open up that first step here from the trigger, you'll see I can grab the ID of the actual action card that was just created because that's what we want to keep moving along, updating. So from here, the label ID, we've set a lookup table. So this is just a neat little way of doing kind of a mapping exercise. So the label IDs that I have here specific to what I want to set the card to. If that type of content came in as a video, I want to set it to this. If it was a blog post, set it to that. And you can set up any number of mappings here that you need. Now, in this update step, I could also pick the assignee, like the title of this recipe says. However, I want to build that off of a conditional. I don't want every card that comes in to be set to a specific person. I could, of course, do that here, but for this logic, that's not what I wanted. So on the next steps, you'll see that I have an if conditional. So clicking between these steps, just to give you an idea, when you add a step, you have a couple options. You can either add an action in an app, which have been these previous steps 2 and 3. You can also set ifs, if else, for loops for repeat actions. You can also call other recipes, stop the job, or handle errors. Here I've done an if else, basically saying that if that type of content equaled a full campaign, I wanted to do this update, which here I've set the assignee to myself. However, any other condition, so if the type of content was literally anything besides a full campaign, I want to do this action instead, which is set to Alice. So that's that full recipe, just running through, pulling out the value of that custom field, and making a few changes to the card automatically because it's repeatable logic that I know I want to happen every time. Jump back to my recipes and take a look at the intake process. Go ahead and stop the recipe. And what we're looking at here is the jobs. You can also click in to any of these to take a look at what happened at a specific time. You can see that this is here while we were running the demonstration. So you can actually debug or see what happened, where some of the information kind of flowed through. Really great way of looking back at after the recipe has run, why did it do specific things that you told it to? So if we take a look at this recipe, this is the recipe that drove a lot of the actual moving of the cards, creating new actions in other projects, deciding if it was an action or a project, applying templates. So for here, the trigger I wanted to listen to was actually anytime an action was updated in that intake project, but only listening for status updates. I don't want it to run when anything else has changed on the card. And I've also set a trigger condition. So only if that data pill status equaled completed. So only when we moved it to completed is this recipe going to run. Here I've set some variables at the top, pulling out company name, action or project, type of content. You'll notice again, these are those custom fields that we have set on the card, just for ease of use later in the recipe. If we take a look here at the left, even though we're going kind of down, you can also see that there's a little bit of a left to right hierarchy of buckets kind of nesting the conditionals. So the first one I'll call out here is if the action or project equaled an action, we're going to go through this set of work. However, if it equaled a project, we're going to do this. There were only two conditionals here. I could have, of course, also, just like the previous recipe, done an if else, but with two specific distinct answers to that question, I wanted to go ahead and just define them as action or project. So if it equaled an action, I went ahead and pulled the list of projects in Hive using a custom action. So if there's ever something that you're trying to achieve with a recipe, and you don't see it as a native option in an action, you can always build a custom action. Take a look at our API documentation and type in the HTTP request here with the method and specific path. You can also add data pills dynamically to help you build that in a more repeatable process going forward. So pulled all the projects within Hive. Now, something that I've done here is I move that card over to completed for company A. What happens if company A project didn't exist? Here I'm taking into account for that kind of edge case. So if there was already a project for that card to be moved to, then we go into this bucket. However, if there was no project, we will then do these set of commands. So essentially what I've done here is created the new action in the other project. So you can see here, I pulled over the title, the description carried over. I carried over the due date and the start date, and then pulled over the same labels. This project ID I've built dynamically to go look for a project titled Company A and create that card there. And then the next step, applying the action template that we went through. So based on that type of content, again, I've used a lookup table here just to set up that mapping. So if I had less than 3, I can delete some. If I have more than 3, you can build this out as a bigger list as well, handling it dynamically in the recipe and then not having to worry about it in the future. The only change here would be that if the project didn't exist for it to go to, we go ahead and create the project first, so that if you get a new customer or there's a new kind of section for whatever your custom field is set to, that you want a new project to pop up, and now any of the requests that come in for that specific line of work, whether it's customer or team, a specific type of project, however you have it set up for your workflow, we create that project first. So we can set project sharing type, you can set members, you can put it under specific parent projects. There's a whole host of optional fields as well as you're kind of building and configuring these things automatically. From there, we're just doing the same 2 steps, but now within this project instead of the project that already existed. The last part of this recipe here is that if the card said it was a project and not an action, we're just going to go ahead and create a project. And from there, it's the same, similar layout as step 9 here, where we're passing a title, description, I wanted the start date to be today. So instead of passing a due date, there's a number of formulas that you can use. So if you turn on formula mode, you can use something like today that will always pick today's date as the start date to go into that field. And then passing due date, and kind of configuring this the same way, right? So parent project, we wanted it to go under that client full campaigns, and then copy from another project. We wanted that specific template. That's it for the intake recipe. Now let's get into one of the emails recipes, just as one of the last ones here. So here we're listening for any new or any updated action within Hive. When the status is changed, similar to the completed recipe from before, only in the intake project. However, this time we only want to listen for when the status equals completed. So this one, when it's completed, we're going to send that email out to the form submitter. The archived one is very similar. That status trigger condition would just be archived instead of completed. Here we're using a different kind of set of logic. So if it was an external submitter, their created by would be their email. So we run through this set, and then we go ahead and stop the recipe within this if conditional. However, if it wasn't external, we want to go ahead and get more information about them within their user ID within Hive. So we pass that here. Gmail as my connector here. So taking some of the information that we've accrued during the recipe, I want to pass the email of that user. I want to dynamically set the subject, so putting the title of the request, and then build out the message that I want to send as that notification. These can either be text or HTML email types. I wasn't trying to format anything here today, so I kept it as text, but you can pass any amount of information from the data pills in previous steps to build out your custom message. Now, most of the recipes that deal with email, we also provide the Outlook step. You don't need both of these, but just for your ease of use, we've configured them the same. So these are skipped. A skipped step won't run when the recipe runs, but you can just choose which one you use at your work, whether it's a Gmail or Outlook, and use the one that's appropriate for your kind of workflow. The last one quickly here is the auto archive. You can see here, this one's much shorter. So if we moved a card into that auto archive status, we want to just go ahead and archive the card. So recipes can be very long and intricate. They can also be 2 steps just to achieve something simple that you're looking to do. So those are the recipes that we used for the webinar today. However, there are 100 recipes available in the community library that cover a number of different integrations as well as automation logic for your Hive workspace. You can use these recipes as is, or when you copy them down, configure them to meet your specific needs. Suze, I will pass it back over to you for the last couple slides.
Thank you so much, Brian. This was amazing. And thank you so much, Gina, for answering questions as quickly as you could in our Q&A area. If you do not use Hive Automate, just a little bit more information how you can access this right now. At all times, you've got 14 days to try it out. All you have to do is just go to the apps section in the left-hand side panel and just switch it on. After 14 days, you can purchase an add-on, which is $5 per workspace per month, which allows you to run up to 500 automation tasks every month. If you need more than 500 automation tasks per month, please reach out to your account manager or to marketing@hive.com, and we'll provide more information on how this can happen. We also have a professional services team ready to answer any of your questions and help you with setting up recipes and running your workflows. So just reach out to support via support center, or again, just email marketing@hive.com, and we'll put you in touch with the right person. Just wanted to open it up now to any additional questions, which we can tackle live.
So I tried to answer this one in the Q&A, but Brian, I think this would be a great question for some additional discussion. But being that some of the recipes that we looked at today are really code-driven, you know, what would you say is like the level of knowledge or proficiency that a user needs to be able to start working with Hive Automate?
Yeah, that's a great question. Some of the aspects of what we covered today do have a couple code snippets in them. I would say that just understanding the logic behind, if this happens in my workspace, what are the things I want to happen automatically? If you understand that, that's all you need to get started. It's incredibly simple to kind of pick the trigger and the action there. And there are a bunch of native fields that you can fill out. I'll say that the couple code commands that you saw today, they are actually already configured in those recipes that we released to the community library. So even for some of those that you'd like to get up and working in your own workspace, it would be as simple as maybe changing an ID or two. So the barrier to entry is very low to get things up and working in the workspace to fit your business needs. But like Sue's mentioned, if there is some further help that you'd like, or some things you'd like to discuss as potential things to implement within your workspace, we do offer a number of ways to help.
That's awesome. We just got a new question too that says, I'm setting up a new project. What should I create first? The template, the actions, and then the recipe. My project has a ton of little steps and I want to set it up correctly to make my life as easy as possible.
Yeah, great question. For that, I would say that setting up the project template first would probably be the best step. So setting up the project template, and doing so, you'd be setting up some of the actions within that project template. From there, that project template lives in the templates section of your project navigator. From there, you can use it in perpetuity, whether you're manually creating a project within Hive or you're creating a project from a recipe. I would say the recipe would probably come last in that step, just because then you already have the template set up that you want to apply to the logic within the recipe.
That's a great question. Awesome. Is there an ability for forms to be saved in draft mode before officially submitting? It's a new question. So, and I can answer this one actually. I'll just click answer.
Yeah, go for it.
So forms, once they're created and saved, they're going to be visible and available to either at a minimum your Hive users, or depending on the setting that you have, if it's going to be available by a public link, then anybody with access to that link is going to be able to see the form as well. But we might have a feature request. I'm just going to double check. I believe we do, about being able to save forms in draft mode. So I will share that in the chat. And if that sounds like some functionality you'd be interested in, please go ahead and follow that and share it with your team as well. So let's see if we have a couple other questions.
The other one that I'll go ahead and take here, someone asked, is there a way to test out recipes without everyone in the workspace being affected? So this is a great question, and some areas that Gina and I are releasing help articles, and there are a few out there around testing recipes to help you get started. We definitely recommend building your recipes in kind of little blocks. so that as you go through steps, you know previous steps have achieved the results that you're looking for. But an easy way to kind of test things out without affecting everyone in your workspace is to point the recipe at maybe a test project, right? So if you want to change a whole bunch of things within a project live, once it's working, maybe you point that at the project that you're actually using for your workflow. But up until then, you could use another project you created just as kind of a dummy space to add actions or make those changes so that it doesn't affect your real workflow, if you will.
Awesome. And then your question, Shirley, about can you apply multiple templates as you would move through an approval process? It is possible to apply multiple templates to either the same project or to the same action card, and that will basically append any existing actions that you have there. And then a quick question about Hive Automate being included within the enterprise license. So it is included as an app, and like Susanna mentioned, it is going to follow along with those tiers depending on the number of automations that you need to run per month. So if you feel like you're going to need more than are available at the 500 per month or 6,000 tasks per year, definitely reach out to us and we can help you move into a higher number of tasks that will work for your team.